science and religion are not mutually exclusive. You can say that the eye's, beautiful and that the earth is beautiful, but you can also say that, like, something greater than ourselves put it into motion.
All right, man. So, Joe,
Sweet.
yeah, we're recording now. We're not live. I was gonna say live, but we're not live. Don't worry. There's all sorts of stuff that we can fix if we need to.
Yeah, sure.
Like for example, in my background, I'm at my office right now where there's like some mess in the background, so I'm gonna cut that out. But yeah, man. So am I supposed to refer to you as Dr. Joe, Dr. Santamaria? How do
Please don't. Just call me Joe. Yeah,
All
no
right.
doctor.
All right.
Joe's
Well,
fine.
I always appreciate when a doctor doesn't let you call him doctor. So that's
Yeah.
cool.
No.
Well, so give me a little bit of your background. I mean, what is your field? You said it's optometry?
Ophthalmology.
Ophthalmology.
So yeah, I do eyes mostly. I'm a comprehensive ophthalmologist, so mostly like cataract and LASIK surgery. But basically, yeah, optometry is kind of like your glasses and stuff like that, which we do. But mostly, it's like management of like surgical diseases of the eye for the most part.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay. Have you
pretty
always
good.
just been fascinated by the eye?
So I always knew I wanted to be a doc for the longest time. My dad's a dentist, and so I was like, I don't really want to do dentistry, and I like just arbitrarily picked the top thing. I was like, I want to be a brain surgeon. Had no idea why, but wanted to be a physician. In between, glitching again. Hold
Yeah.
on. I don't know why that is. In between college and med school, I worked as an optometry tech in Los Angeles. And so I got to see some LASIK and cataract surgery, which was awesome. And then got to med school, thought I might wanted to do a couple different things. Was actually leaning towards plastic surgery. But once I started doing ophthalmology stuff, like I saw that all the surgeons were super happy, good quality of life, super rewarding. Patients were happy. So I thought that would be a good fit. Most surgeons, unfortunately, have a difficult sort of home life balance, but ophthalmology is pretty good.
That's interesting. Why is that? Because you mentioned your father being a dentist, and I actually heard a stat about like dentists have one of the highest depression rates or suicide rates and things. Is that
It's
like
funny.
so?
I don't think that's true, and
Yeah.
I realize that more. It's got to be like dentistry. It must be like just something that's like ironically, it's like the opposite because they do pretty well like financially. A lot of them just work 4 days a week. There's very few things that they like need to go in on call, like emergencies in the middle of the night. So they actually have like a super good quality of life compared to most doctors. I was a general surgery intern for a year, and that's a hard life to do. A lot of the trauma surgeons, it's just difficult. So it's a good balance between like being able to do a little bit with your hands and in clinic and stuff, but also not have to come in the middle of the night for a lot of things. So
Okay.
I like it.
Now, I'd put you in connection with Dr. Chris, and so I know in that Twitter conversation that was a while back, but
Yeah.
And so he does a podcast, and that was his whole shtick is that he's specifically talking to doctors about finance, about because there's just this thing where doctors make a lot of money but they don't build their wealth, and that was exactly what you had kind of commented to me when we were chatting back and forth and stuff. So I thought that was interesting that it's that was illuminating to me. I mean, I just didn't know that was a thing. Do you think that plays a role? Like, do different types of doctors have different financial literacy? I mean, what do you see there?
That's a good question. I don't know if it's by specialty, but just in general, doctors are notorious for just really knowing not a lot about how to manage money, about how to invest. I think it's just because you're just so entrenched in school and science and math like your entire life that you just don't get a lot of the other like I have tons of friends who are just like had no idea what a mortgage was, had no idea what, and I mean I didn't even start my IRA until I finished or was halfway through my residency. I didn't even know what it was. You just don't really get any of that in school, and you're so like you're just in the trenches trying to survive and study your specialty that like pretty much everything else is on the back burner.
Hmm.
So at least in my kind of realm, a lot of doctors are, I mean, military has like pretty good, a little bit of education on how to kind of save for retirement, but in general, the doctors are notoriously bad at knowing what to do with their money. So they can make a lot, but they're actually not particularly wealthy, or at least aren't investing in things that will perform well in the long term. And even worse, like you'll find kind of less of them who are actually Bitcoiners, because that takes quite a bit more kind of work to figure out, I think.
Yeah, it's not just understanding investment go up type thing. It's
Right.
understanding what is money, what are,
Right.
financial systems, what's the role of government and money and that sort of
Right.
thing. So yeah, it can be a pretty tall order. So I see that. So do you kind of
Yeah.
see that as a bit of your mission to help those around you in particular, or do you, I mean, like what's your goal as far as that type of stuff?
I try to be helpful. And I know you kind of talked about it in your book too. There's just there's kind of two different realms, sort of just in general. I try to be helpful with people who have questions about what is an IRA, what is a mutual fund, what should I be investing in with my military retirement, what what should I do with this extra money that I'm making, etc. And then kind of further down is like sort of the Bitcoin thing. I think out of my department of maybe 20 docs, I'm probably the only one that's interested in Bitcoin. Outside of my office, there's actually there is one guy who is the kind of the chief, super interested. He does know, he's a bogglehead essentially, and he does know a lot about finance, but he's more from the traditional fiat finance world, which is fine, but it's super fun to kind of go back and forth with him about Bitcoin in particular, who, so I'm not one for price predictions, but we have a little thing outside of my door. And so he said by 2030, it'll be less than $1,000. But then I have $1 being worth 25 cents in 2030. So
Okay.
we have an ongoing
Wow.
battle.
So you're just shorting each other's positions. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I
That's
try.
cool.
I mean, I try to answer questions when I can, but I think ultimately with Bitcoin, as you've probably encountered, like it's only going to click. You have to come to it on your own. You can only do so much to be helpful, but when you finally admit that you were kind of wrong about it is when you end up investing. So it just takes people a long time.
Mhm. And we don't as humans default to humility. Like if we've
Yeah.
made a prediction on something, am I cutting out a little bit?
No, I'm just turning it up a little.
Oh, okay. But yeah, it's like we as humans, especially because with Bitcoin, it sounds so gimmicky and it sounds so just weird and wonky and nerdy or whatever it happens to be. Or a lot of the people, sadly, are bad representatives of Bitcoin because they only talk about price. They only talk about get rich quick, or there's it gets convoluted with crypto and Bitcoin and people mix those up. And so rightfully so, people that push back, the skeptics, they push back and they make these very bold claims. Again, it's gonna be difficult for your friend to have the humility, if he does get orange pilled at some point, to come out and turn around and say, I thought Bitcoin at 2030 was gonna be less than $1,000.
Right.
You just have to go even further. And now we all did that. I think most of us kind of poo-pooed it at first, and then but at least we didn't have not being public figures at the time when we made those antithetical predictions. It was like one of those things where we don't have something that people can throw back at in our face, like a Peter Schiff, for example. You think of somebody like Peter Schiff, he's been dogging Bitcoin for 10 years. He's gonna get orange pilled at some point. Like he's I think he's like secretly invested in Bitcoin. I'm pretty convinced he is. I don't see how he couldn't be, but he just knows that he has a brand and a reputation, and so it's gonna be I actually thought of a way, like if I was his PR agent, I think that he could actually do that pretty beautifully. I think that he could like warm up, and that could be this big moment of, I was finally, and this was what did it for me, and that sort of thing. And he would be so welcomed by the Bitcoin community. I think that very few people would throw this stuff in his face. They'd just be so happy that guys like that would come around.
Yeah, I love those Twitter posts. And then I think, what is it? Dan Held will just post that old man yells at Bitcoin meme at him every time. I know his son is super into Bitcoin. And I think it's one of those where I feel like he's a Bitcoiner deep down. He just doesn't know it yet. I mean, he's a gold bug. But I say that to the chief of the department because he's a classic bogglehead. He gets his haircut at home. He drives in 20-year-old car. He puts everything away, and he talks about compound interest being the ninth wonder of the world. Like I tell him like, you are a Bitcoiner, you just don't quite know it yet. He's a total low time preference guy, but for some reason he hasn't quite seen the light yet. So we'll get him there. It just might take him a few years.
I think for some people it will just be that, like, and this is how most technologies are. I think like they just need to get to the point of being absolutely undeniable.
Right.
What is the point at which Bitcoin is absolutely undeniable? Like, to me, it's like already there, because I think probably for you, you're just like, if you understand its tenants, you're like, it already does these things, right? Like
Yeah.
if it's censorship resistant money or immutable or, trustless, all those things, Bitcoin already is those things. Like, I don't think Bitcoin is speculative, because the reasons why I buy it, it already is those things. Where crypto and altcoins, they're kind of, it's the promise that they will develop this technology. Or if you're buying Ethereum, it's like, well, it's going to do this merge, and then it's going to do this upgrade. So you're kind of betting that those things can come to fruition, where Bitcoin already is what it is. So to me, it's undeniable, but that's not true for society. Like, I understand why society needs, but yeah, for like the mainstream, what is the point of undeniability?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I think for me, it's one of those, the quote that kind of rings true is like, for most people, it's just so counterintuitive, and then it just becomes hyper intuitive. And when it becomes hyper intuitive, it's just like impossible to unsee. For me, like, I think about when Saylor was talking about, like, what do you put the chances of Bitcoin, having mainstream adoption? Is it 1%? And if it is 1%, why not put at least 1% of your portfolio into Bitcoin as just, as a hedge? I mean, it's hard to argue that it's 0%, especially with, like I kind of mentioned in that little tweet a couple of weeks ago at you, there's just so many different things that you can talk about in terms of use cases. I mean, all the characteristics that you talked about, apolitical, borderless, censorship resistant, decentralized, etc. The ability to kind of, I think us in the United States and Europe are kind of looking at it from a very privileged position, where our currency is essentially the global reserve currency, and we don't have to really worry about a dictator coming in and debasing the currency overnight, or having 120, 140% inflation where everything that we saved is just gone. We're pretty comfortable where we're at. But I think a lot of the world who doesn't have that, it's an awesome opportunity. So I think even if you just look at it, and this is kind of where I started investing, just as like a savings technology, as just like a digital gold. And I think it is that. And so if you look at, the market cap of gold is what, 10 trillion, and Bitcoin's 300 billion. I think especially for our generation, when we're all in our 50s and 60s, like, I mean, I think gold will always be around, but I think Bitcoin will be, people will want that in their IRAs as part of their retirement accounts, to a large degree. And I know companies are starting to try to facilitate that for customers who are interested. But then there's tons of other things that you can get into with Bitcoin. I mean, I kind of wrote down that you talked about in your book, whether it's the network effect with Metcalfe's law, more people using it to kind of transact value, like you did over Lightning, which was like a light bulb moment for me. Energy, you look at Jason Lowery's work with his proof of work and like the weapon of peaceful revolution. I'm in Texas, so, kind of big Bitcoin sort of capital with Bitcoin mining, and the opportunities of kind of Bitcoin being a geographic agnostic place, where, they can be the buyer of first and last resort and buy energy that's otherwise stranded. What was the most recent What Bitcoin Did podcast? I was with the guy from Africa talking about bringing mining infrastructure to super rural communities where a business otherwise would never be, which is beneficial to those folks. So there's so many different angles you can look at it, and I think it's sort of undeniable, and it's hard to unsee. So I think people will get there. It'll just take time, and it'll probably end up being kind of like when the price goes up. Once the price starts ripping again in 2024, whenever it is, that's when everyone will start asking you questions about it and be like, wow, you got super lucky that you invested. So yeah, that's kind of my take.
Have you gone through that phase? So when did you first start buying Bitcoin, if you don't mind me asking?
2020, we were locked down, hospitals were shut down. So we were doing it was kind of crazy times actually. I was in my last year of residency, and we were doing 1 week on, 2 weeks off in the trauma center. And so I had a lot of time to kind of research. I actually figured out about it in 2012. One of my buddies had posted on Facebook, just buy Bitcoin. And I remember this was when I was like exceedingly poor before med school, like, putting like $5 in your gas tank at a time.
Right. Just to get to the place.
Just to get, yeah, it was in LA. I was like on minimum wage. It was bad. It was rough. And I was like, there's just no way I can buy. I think I tried to log on to one of those websites, and I think back then it was just a little sketchier in terms of like, all right, I got to put my credit card information in here. And so I just didn't end up doing it. And I actually second guessed. I was like, when I got into it more in 2020, I looked back and I was like, because you think about how many Facebook posts or Twitter posts that you see over the years. And I was like, did I just make this up, or did my friend post about Bitcoin in 2012? And I actually went to his Facebook and scrolled back 8 years and found it. And it said, buy Bitcoin. And I messaged him. I was like, this is super random and weird, but like, did you buy Bitcoin? And he ended up, buying it, but selling it like, a year or two later for like 100% profit, like $200 or something.
Right.
And then like most plebs, it took me a couple at bats. So that was my first. My second was in 2017. Everyone was buying it. It was running up to like 19,000. Again, I was still poor and it was already up so much. I was like, that's just a gimmick. I'm not going to do it. Crash back down. And I think I had the thought most people had, which was like, of course I was right about it, and kind of left it alone. And then it wasn't until 2020, my third crack at it, that I started reading more about it. At that point, I was kind of just dollar cost averaging with Ethereum and Bitcoin, and kind of was listening to more Ethereum podcasts like Bankless, Daily Refuel, stuff like that. I don't know if you a lot of it does make sense, and I see the utility of it, but so much of it I would try to explain to people, like what Web3 was, what bridging was, what wrap tokens were, and I just didn't quite make sense to me. And the more I went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, the more it clicked, and I started to head over to the kind of the Bitcoin only side.
Yeah, that's cool, man. So you went through, so you were in 2020, and I don't know how public you were amongst your friends and family as far as the fact that you had done that. When the price was going up in 2021, were you getting texts and calls, or people reaching out to you like, oh, I heard you were into it, like, tell me about it? Were you already getting that? Yeah,
a little bit. I hadn't put that much in, and honestly, like my friends and family aren't quite into it, at least not to the degree that I am. I have a couple close friends that are. But yeah, I mean, when it was up in the 60,000s, they were like, I was actually buying more when they were, telling me I should probably sell. So I bought all the way up and I bought all the way down, and I'm still buying, still buying.
Yeah. Do you do any mining, like either at home or hosted mining or anything like that?
No. So I'm kind of at that sort of stage in the club cycle where, so I was buying on just an exchange and keeping it there. And then finally kind of educated myself more and made the leap to cold storage probably a year ago. Which is surprisingly easy, but I think there's definitely a barrier for folks to kind of make that leap, to just start I think they just kind of just see a disaster happening regardless of what they do, and them losing all their coins or whatever. So I finally did it, and at that point I'm just only cold storage. So that's what I try to do for most of my friends, is try to teach them how to self-custody, which I think is super important. And then now I'm trying to sort of educate myself on how to run my own node, which is pretty, I think, basic, but I'm just learning. So
yeah, that's all part of it, man. It's all part of the decentralization, and yeah, I think that's cool. Just one more connection, right?
It's fun. I mean, there's just so much to do. There's so many levels to it, and there's so much to learn, and there's so much to do. It's like kind of like medicine. There's just like, you're always learning. That's what I love about Bitcoin. There's just always something to learn, and it's super humbling. When you think you kind of like understand something, you listen to other people talk about it, and you're like, I'm so far behind that. So it's good. And there's just so many awesome people to learn from in the space.
Yeah.
Including myself.
Oh, well, thanks, man. I appreciate that. And I appreciate that you read the book and that you, tweeted about it. The thread was really cool. And yeah, man, that was you were very poetic in the way that you wrote some of those things. So yeah, you definitely have some writing chops.
I appreciate it. Congrats on all the success with that. That's awesome.
Thanks, man. It's the pleb community is like very loyal. So
Yeah.
you start, get into the hands of a few Bitcoiners, and people cheer for one another, because it's,
Yeah.
I even mentioned that at the beginning of the book. Is just like, that's kind of the beautiful thing about a system where everybody's incentive is like a self incentive. Like you benefit other people by trying to benefit yourself, right? The miners by enriching themselves, they're adding security to the network, right? And anybody that's providing content, they might be enriching themselves, or extending their brand, or whatever it happens to be, but it's helping every single other Bitcoin holder, and it's helping adoption and all those things. So it's like, that's the only type of system you can really count on. I like the idea of altruism, and I like the idea of expecting the best out of other people. But when you build the system based on trusting other people that they're going to do the right thing, like, I like to think of myself as a pretty moral guy. I have a set of moral codes. I screw up a lot though, so you shouldn't base the system off of me. And I don't have a lot of financial, incentives as, maybe politicians and certain leaders might, to act against, people. I screw up just because I'm a flawed human being, but
we all are.
right. But so you were one of the things that, when you were talking about your friend that had bought in 2012 and that sold at 100% profit, I mean, it's just funny. It's going to be really interesting to look back, Lord willing, we get to look back 20 years from now, and what are the things that we're going to think about the people that sold at certain times, because in the moment he feels like a genius. Any investment that you made 100% profit on, that is a great investment, right? The value investment would be like, the value investor would say that is amazing, and the Warren Buffett school is going to go crazy for that kind of return. But in hindsight, it wasn't the right move. Like, it was, but it wasn't. And I was reminded of a tweet. I don't know if you've seen this, and I'm going to get it slightly wrong, but it was like 2010. And everybody brings this tweet up like once a year, whenever, the anniversary when it was tweeted. But the guy said something about like, I'm kicking myself. Bitcoin went to 32 cents and I sold at 16. I'm going to kill myself, And it's one of those things like, you just had no idea where it was going, if you had regret that it went to 32 cents and you were going to kill yourself, like, how are you feeling right now? So
they found that guy. He actually, I forget who he was, but he commented later that I think he still had some Bitcoin or something.
Okay, good. So that makes me feel a little bit better for him.
It wasn't as bad as the pizza guy, I don't think. So
he did okay. The pizza guy, have you read or watched any interviews or read any interviews with him, Laszlo?
Just briefly, and I think his reasoning, like he can't really regret it. I mean, at that point, I mean, people had no idea what it was, and he had no idea if it would go anywhere. So you just got to put yourself in that mindset where it's like, at that point, like, that's a great deal. Like, you have this random thing that you have 10,000 of, and you can buy a pizza with it. Who would have known, where it would go? I think the only people that ultimately would have ended up keeping those coins would be like people who forget their keys. Like, I think most people going through so many cycles, there's very few people, I think, that could have just held through, 2017 and back down.
Especially 100% of it, right? Like, to keep maybe a small fraction, but so that I find a little bit of inspiration in the Laszlo pizza story, because it goes, of all people, it's funny. I learned this from Gary Gensler in his MIT course. I don't know if you've ever watched his MIT course on Bitcoin.
I haven't, but I know he knows a lot about it.
He does. And it's very interesting that he's in the role that he's in now, but he also actually, like, listening to him discuss the tenets of Bitcoin and the history of it. It's like, this guy knows his stuff. But you see the maybe the talons or the political biases that affect some of the things that he does. But anyways, in his course, he talks about the history of it, and he talks about the Bitcoin pizza thing, and he actually even goes back to the early days of the internet. I believe if it wasn't the first transaction, it was one of the first big public transactions on the internet, was ordering a pizza. And so the problem was with the early internet, there was no payment rail. Like, there's the error 404, page not found code, but there is, like, I think it's error 405 or whatever it happens to be. Right. And so the original, creators of the internet, thought that there would be a payment rail on
Mhm.
the internet. And so that was kind of the shortcoming of the first pizza that was ordered.
Yeah.
It was, okay, you can order the pizza, but you can't pay until the delivery guy shows up to your door and you hand him some
Yeah.
cash and it's done. Great, cool
Right.
invention. But that was what Laszlo was actually trying to complete. It was like the completion of this
Yeah.
prophecy, right? Like the
Right.
internet now had done payment for a pizza. And so,
Right.
you know, he talks about it that, yeah, he's like, yeah, I don't regret it because that was a necessary step in order for Bitcoin to be, you know, one step closer to hyper Bitcoinization. Now he was so
Yep.
early, but I tell people on Twitter all the time, because I give a lot of sats away for, you know, just
I know. I see it.
promotion and stuff. And it's
Yeah.
fun. It's really cool for people. It's a great learning experience.
Yep.
And I like it because it's actually like one of the promises of like the decentralization. And it's one of the things that a lot of like altcoin chains promise is, oh,
Right.
we're going to decentralize ad models. I'm like, we can already do that with Bitcoin and Lightning. We can
Right.
decentralize the ad model. I mean, I don't know if you've ever paid to boost a post on Twitter, but you could pay
Mhm.
$50 to boost your post. You might, and you know, I'm selling books.
Mhm.
I might get like 16 likes on the post and
Sure.
no book sales, nothing, no attention, no new followers, nothing like that. I'll spend, so instead of $50, I'll just
Like
give
$2.
$2 directly to the plebs in the form of
Yeah.
2 cents each. And I'll
Mhm.
get 150 retweets. I'll get book sales. I'll get people, I'll get booked for new interviews and all this
Yeah.
stuff off
Oh
of
yeah.
$2. And it's cool because it's like these micropayments are going directly to the plebs.
Right.
But people ask me all the time because I've given like millions and millions of sats away.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that a sat's going to be worth $1 someday, or at
Yeah.
least
Yep.
I think at least in my lifetime, probably at least a penny.
Yep.
And so that would be a substantial sum of money. But I tell people all the time, I want to have my Bitcoin pizza moment someday, where, because to me that just represents that we played a part, we made some sort of sacrifice to kind of further it. And you know what, that's not a entirely selfless motive. If Bitcoin gets to
Sure.
that place, I will be doing all right as well too. So
Yeah.
it's not, you know, it's not like I'm Mr. Good Guy over here just, you know, sacrificing for everybody else, but it's part of it. I think it's just one step closer to that hyper Bitcoinization.
You're spreading the word too, and you're bringing more people into the fold, which is all we can really do. I mean, half of my job as an ophthalmologist is, yes, one, to operate and take care of patients, but two, it's I try to educate them, and so that they can take better control of their own health, and to kind of understand what's going on with themselves. And so most of my day is just kind of teaching patients some basic things. And so that's exactly what you're doing. And I think that's what a lot of Bitcoiners try to do, is just try to educate. And that's all we can do. And I still think we're super early. And I think it's hard to see kind of what this is. You just have to totally step back and look through a totally different lens. I really liked in your book in the beginning, and I actually knew this was going to be, I was started to read the chapter and I was like, he's got to have Henry Ford in the car in there, talking about, you know, each in a big innovation, you know, people, you know, either are skeptical or just outright, you know, denounce it as never being possible. And I think this is probably the same thing. I think, you know, 20, 30 years from now, people are going to look back and be questioning why we ever did things certain ways, whether that's saving, whether that's trans-border cross-country payments, you know, things like that, waiting multiple hours and days. I mean, even things as basic as just ACH deposits, just taking, you know, 5 or 6 days where we can just transmit value instantly. Things that, like, for me, like, it just blew my mind that, you know, when I, you know, started self-custodying, that I can just memorize these 24 words, and God forbid something were to happen, I could move to any country in the world and restart with those 24 words. I mean, for me, that was just mind-blowing. So I think it's hard to really appreciate that till you actually do it. But I think, like you said, I think 20 years from now, I think we're going to look back and be like, we were early and we did good trying to help people get into it early.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what a lot of people miss, is that, oh, I'm not getting until 2023 or 2024. You know, this next halving cycle, I think, is going to be absolutely bananas.
Right.
It's because everyone gets bigger and more prevalent. And the thing about this Bitcoin winter or bear market, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
one of the things that I noticed in this one that is different from the other ones, I don't hear a lot of the status quo sentiment saying anything about Bitcoin going to zero at some point. Like you have
Right.
your friend that says that, but even his bullish scenario is like just less than 1,000. Like, so he's still saying there might be a
Yeah.
couple of dorks
It'll still
that are
exist.
into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know if on CNBC or Fox Business or whatever that I hear that, because it almost seems like nobody wants to say that anymore because they don't want to be the dumb one that gets
Right.
that wrong,
They don't
And
want to be totally
so,
wrong.
yeah,
Yep.
every other bear market was Bitcoin's going to zero, Bitcoin's going to zero by the establishment. Now they're not even saying that. So I think that you're going to have this 2 year, period or 1 year period or whatever leading up to it, where the sentiment was more FTX was a scam. These exchanges were scams, which are just kind of like these healthy brush fires that's like
Yep.
kind of cleansing the industry. And
It
and I
is.
think it's up to us to illuminate these things to our friends that, yeah, that was actually just a repeat of the old system, and that was the
Right.
problem, right? And so that's why Bitcoin self custody is so important, because FTX was selling Bitcoins to people, but they were just marks on a ledger that didn't
Yeah.
exist. I mean, all
You and
these
I own
things.
more Bitcoin. Yeah. Mhm.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we own more than the billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar company.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, so for you, like, where do you think this is going in this next bull cycle? Do you think that the next bull cycle is going to usher in like a high degree of public acceptance? I know we were talking about that a little bit earlier. Do you think the bull run has a factor on that, or is it more going to be merchant adoption? Is it going to be those kind of technical things rather than just a cycle?
Probably a little bit. That's a good question. My guess, probably a little bit of both. I think this is granted I'm new to Bitcoin for sure. But and this is definitely my first bear market. But from what I've kind of heard and understood of prior bear markets, like you said, kind of the argument that it's going to go to zero. I think this bear market, at least for a lot of people, has been awesome. Not only is it just an opportunity to learn more about it and buy cheap Bitcoin. Oh, Amber Alert. But it's been an opportunity for the FTX. I remember when FTX was happening, I was on paternity leave. We just had a baby,
Oh,
and
congrats, man. That's cool.
thank you. So I was up at like all hours of the night, and I was just refreshing Twitter, looking at like in real time, watching Dylan LeClaire and a bunch of other people live tweet this thing. And it was just nuts. I like couldn't believe it. And I was actually getting texts, and a couple of the residents were asking me like, aren't you worried that, they just didn't see the difference between Bitcoin and everything else that was going on. It was a great opportunity, one, to just, like you said, brush fire, cleanse the system, wash out all the leverage. And I think bear markets are good in getting rid of a lot of the tourists. And each cycle, at least from what I've kind of surmised, is each cycle you're left with the people who believe in it the most, and who are kind of believe in the long-term thesis, and that number just keeps growing. So I forget the stat of how much Bitcoin hasn't moved in over 2 years. I want to say it's like over 50% or something. But each time we have these deep dark bear markets, it just kind of solidifies that core group, and then we kind of gather more up on the next cycle up. I'm sure the next time Bitcoin rips up back to previous all-time highs and stuff, we'll get people who will always jump in to make a quick dollar. But I think a small percentage of those at least will take the time to do the proof of work and understand Bitcoin. So when the next bear market happens, they're back in our ranks still.
Yeah.
And I think over the years, it's just that number is going to continue to grow until, like Corey from Swan talks about, having that 10 million, where it's just so many people that it's just undeniable at that point.
Right. Yep.
So
That's great, man. And now, as far as like the freedom and liberty element of Bitcoin, where are you on that spectrum? Is that something that appeals to you? Is that something that you're like, okay, like I think that's fine, but that's not something that draws you in? I mean, that's been a big front and center component of Bitcoin in the last few years that didn't, it was something that libertarians in the community talked about and that sort of thing, but it wasn't kind of front and center, in terms of every Bitcoiner talked about that. So it seems like that's much more prevalent now.
Yeah, I do too. I've admittedly become a little bit more of a libertarian the more I've gotten into Bitcoin. And I think it is an opportunity, especially with kind of the way you see things trending, government overreach, or just kind of like surveillance on what things are going on, or like what was it this year, like small businesses making payments on Venmo over $600 having to report. And I think it's kind of, I can see where things are sort of trending. And I think it's Bitcoin is sort of like this peaceful sort of rebellion to that, where you can store some of your wealth and something that can't be corrupted or touched or anything like that. So for me, I think it's kind of undeniable, and I'm all for it.
That's cool. Now, have you heard of Jason Mayer? His book that's coming out, I believe he crowdfunded it and he's in the process of writing it, but he's gotten a lot of attention already. I think it's called The Progressive's Case for Bitcoin. Have you heard
I've heard
about
about
that?
it.
Yeah.
Is it out?
You know what? I don't know. I think bits and pieces of it are because he's been promoting it a lot. But I think it comes out. I was looking at his website the other day. Comes out, I think, in a couple months officially, if I remember correctly. But that'll be interesting because it seems like there's a bit of a political divide in Congress and these hearings and things like that. That was kind of that. I think that was some of the fishiness about the last year and a half, when you had these congressional hearings, and it was like there was a lot of friendliness from Democrats who had traditionally been against it. But it seemed to be very much centered around FTX. It wasn't that they were friendly towards crypto or Bitcoin in general. It was like very much that there was a little gravitational pull from FTX. So that in hindsight was interesting. I remember at the time thinking, what's going on? Why are they becoming more friendly to it? I thought, I guess my assumption was this must just be their way of buttering up the public for the CBDC that's going to come. They're going to, say, hey, this technology is not evil. You know what? We're just going to make a better version of it. But on that note, like, what do you think? I mean, what are your thoughts on, CBDCs and good, bad, indifferent? What is Bitcoin's role in that? All that good stuff.
Yeah, I'm definitely not a fan of that, or anything where you can track payments, and it's sort of like a slippery slope, I think. I mean, I don't know, you see in China with money that needs to be spent before a certain date or it'll expire. I tend to typically not sort of trust something that's going to be issued by a centralized authority, and while we have Bitcoin, I don't really see what the use case is for CBDCs. But yeah, no, I'm looking forward to reading that book for sure. It'll be interesting to see, while also just kind of following people like Senator Warren and all of them talking about the space. But
yeah,
we'll see.
I forget what the book was. I read a book about China's CBDC, and it wasn't one that particularly slammed it or anything like that. It was just kind of just objectively talking through what it is. And China actually promotes their CBDC as a privacy-based currency. I don't know if you've heard of that. Heard that? I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Not surprising that China would lie, but so it's always like you just have to ask, why a little bit. I even mentioned that in the book, asking why 5 times, or what do you mean by that? So in China, there's actually no expectation of privacy. And so when the government says, they're actually not lying when they say that, because there's no expectation of privacy from the government. What they mean is, and that's why they build this as a cool feature. When you're going to a hot dog merchant on the street and you're exchanging your CBDCs with them, it's privacy so that the street merchant doesn't have your information. And so it's like, okay, I get it. Like, that is somewhat of a benefit as opposed to swiping your credit card and things like that. But I think those little nuanced things are going to be really important for Americans to understand, that as these things roll out here, to look out for those types of things that would appeal to our American ideals that aren't necessarily so, right? Oh, no, this is a privacy-based currency. Oh, okay, cool. Like, they said that on, CNN. And so that's great. Well, maybe that's not 100% accurate, but it's the propaganda campaign. But.
Yeah, no, interesting. I didn't know that about the China CBDC.
Yeah, that was interesting for me. Now, as far as you mentioned that you're married.
Yeah. Okay. Wife is from Austin, Texas. And so I think we're going to be pretty much in Texas from here on out. You're in California, right?
I'm in California, SoCal.
Nice.
We're holding out here, man. It's we got a nice, our county, our sheriff is amazing here. We were able to do the COVID, go through the COVID phase, less restricted than most of California. And that was something that was really really eye-opening for me throughout COVID. I
Mhm.
never really truly understood the difference between, or the importance of local government versus state
Mhm.
government versus federal government. And so that was like a real world example, because yeah,
Yep.
California had all sorts of crazy stuff that was going on, but the sheriff can say no. Like they really have the power
Interesting.
to say no on things. And because they're the law enforcement arm
Yeah.
of the state. But if it's something that's outside of the state constitution, or especially the United States Constitution, they can put that up. Now, it's really dark and kind of
Mhm.
sad and scary, but we've had a really a uncommonly high amount of sheriff's deputies in our county being killed recently. And like
Oh my
some under
gosh.
like really strange circumstances. So I don't know if it's just, if it's that it very well might just be, Occam's razor, the most simplest example,
Yeah.
explanation is that California is letting everybody out of the prisons, and the violent offenders are out of the prisons and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But we had two sheriff's deputies that within 24 hours died in car accidents that weren't violent offenses, but they were like really
Yeah.
mysterious circumstances. So it's one of those things where it's getting pretty hairy here in California.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people think that the COVID stuff's done.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of powers that be that are not happy with the way that our sheriff was
Nope.
preserving the liberties of people in our county. But
Yep.
anyway, so yeah, it's been very, very kind of I don't
No,
know,
yeah.
murky in terms of that kind of stuff right now. So anyways, yeah, I'm trying to through a series of friends, I have some connections with the sheriff. So I'm trying
Yeah.
to send orange pill information to him, like, hey, if we ever need to have that parallel economy, you can protect us and we'll make sure that we have the parallel economy going. So we might have a little I don't know, a new state here in California that
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, that's I'm from California. I'm from Sacramento originally.
okay.
Went to college at Loyola Marymount in Southern
Oh,
California. Still
yeah.
have family in Southern California. So yeah, no, they were definitely not wherever you were at, because I remember during COVID, my brother came out to visit. And we were going to the grocery store and he's like, "Oh my God, I forgot my mask." This is like a year after COVID. I forgot my mask. I was like, "You're in Texas, you're gonna be okay." No one's gonna say anything to you.
Yeah. Oh my
Um,
gosh.
but yeah, no, it was sad to see. I mean, all the, gyms that he used to work out at, the climbing gyms, I mean, restaurants he used to eat at, it was just devastating. And yeah, I mean, California was an awesome place to grow up. I miss it a lot, but
Mm.
it sounds like you found a good little niche there.
Yeah, man. I mean,
Yeah.
it's there was plenty of headaches, because we run a chain of small businesses here as well.
Sure.
And we decided to we closed for the first month. We were actually out of state doing an adoption thing across the country in Florida. So I wasn't going to have my employees hold the fort down when
Yeah.
everything else was going bananas. So we
Yeah.
closed down for the month. We were gone. And then when we got back, we opened right back up. About outside of that, you out of here, Sarah? All right, see you. But you know, my our mayor and our city
Mhm.
council had actually voted to shut off the power for any businesses that were still holding out, that were staying open. So
Wow.
we went down, we got every business owner that was still open, and we went down and we just like let them have it. The really interesting thing, so I actually read a quote from my high school government teacher, who just
Uh-huh.
happened to also be the mayor that was doing this. So when I was in high school, my government teacher was now the mayor that was trying to shut off power to my business. And I read something from his class about freedom and liberty, dude. It was awesome.
Oh my God.
It was a pretty wild time.
Did it work?
It worked. I mean, they didn't shut off the power. So I think I
Sweet.
don't think it was my speech, but I think it was enough people. I was pretty calm. There was some restaurant owners that came in,
Sure.
they were Italian, and
I was
they
gonna say,
just
are they Italian? They're
they lit
probably
they,
Italian.
they lit
Yeah.
them up, man. Yeah, it was great. We needed the Italian firepower. So
It was
anyways,
probably your speech
you know what?
with a little Italian.
That's what I told my wife. I said it was my
Yeah.
speech. We did it.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah. So that was yeah. So yeah, we got to make it through.
Yeah.
Relatively. It was, our area was very similar to like a Texas setup.
Sure.
I had
Sure.
enough businesses I could go to. My kids never once wore a mask during COVID. We homeschool and stuff like that. So we were
Yeah.
able to
Good
like
for
kind
you.
of shield from some of those things.
Yeah.
I wore a mask twice for funerals. That was it.
Sure.
So anyways, that for as a Californian, that was like I don't know any of my friends that
I don't know
were able
anyone
to
else
say
that.
that. Yeah.
No.
But anyways, I was asking about your
Welcome.
wife earlier. Now, is she orange pilled, or is she just like, okay, Joe, you do your thing and I'll let you be?
She supports my orange pill being missed. Like she definitely understands it, and she hears me talk about it all day, and just sort of like by osmosis has learned quite a bit about it. It's funny, she actually works in software sales and works with a lot of the big banks. So she hears me kind of rant about stuff, and in the car she's kind enough to let me listen to kind of Bitcoin podcasts and stuff, and heavy metal, but yeah, and Bitcoin podcasts. But yeah, she understands the thesis, and she's supportive of me, investing our money into it now. Just started doing a dollar cost average every day for our 2-month-old. And
Wow.
we'll give her the keys when she's 18,
That's awesome.
which will be kind of cool. And so a lot of times I'll get like Bitcoin themed gifts too. I have like the kind of stock ticker that shows Bitcoin's price in our living room, so she lets me do that too. So
That's awesome.
she's definitely supportive.
That's really cool.
Are you a family of Bitcoiners?
We are. Yeah. So my wife's pretty on board. When we first bought Bitcoin, I told her, and I think it was good that she had this kind of like, we had this framework, because by the time I bought it, I basically studied it for a year and then bought it at the end of the year. So I was like very deeply orange pilled, like kind of understood it beyond just the price action and stuff.
Right.
And so when I was buying the first, same thing as you though, I wish I had more money at the time, but I bought a few Bitcoin and they were $250 a piece. And in hindsight, I was like, man, I could stack up on some Bitcoins now if they're that price. But anyways, I scraped together what we could get. And I told her, I said, these are going to be worth $10,000 someday. And just so you know, that's not going to be enough. Like we're not like the premise back then was already from the beginning was, this is money. We're just going to increase our buying power. So we're only going to we can spend them if we ever need to, but we're not turning them back into fiat. And so that was kind of like, and so she understood from day one, like, okay, that this is like, we're going into this and we're kind of, dollar cost averaging. I wish I would have dollar cost average right out of the gate too. But I was like, oh, I'm in. Okay, I'm good. And I waited a few more years before I actually DCA'd a bit harder. But anyways, all that to say, so she's been on board for a while. Once I wrote my book, she read the book. I think that kind of deepened her conviction, because there was just aspects that, don't come up in conversation, or you don't think. I'm like, oh, she's gonna be bored by this. She's a very much like freedom, liberty minded person. And so those elements really spoke to her, and some of the the historical things that we put in the book and stuff. My kids, I have 4 kids. Every one of them has created their own Bitcoin wallet, and they had to fund it. So they earn sats for chores and stuff. Even my 4-year-old has her own seed phrase stored in her little safe. She has a little plastic safe and everything. And they get, I mean, dude, you can get a lot done in the household for, 5,000 sats. Like, hey, can you guys do the laundry? That sort of thing. So yeah, we have 2 9-year-olds, a 7-year-old. One of our 9-year-olds is adopted. So a boy and a girl. Awesome. 7-year-old and then 4-year-old. Yeah. And all of them can import their wallet. They've all written it down. Like they have their seed phrase. I had them come up each with a different creative way to write down their seed phrase, so that if one of their friends opened their safe somehow, that they wouldn't be able to decipher it. So they actually had to encrypt in a simple way. They had to encrypt their own seed phrase. It's pretty wild when you just like walk them through that, how they get it. Like you can make it so fun. Like, okay, now what we're going to do is like, here's your 12 words. How do you make it so that if somebody read this, they wouldn't understand it, but you would understand it? And so it just starts turning the wheels, and they're like doing cryptographic type of things. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
What a cool, I mean, as a kid, like what's cooler than like a secret password, right? Like,
exactly. Yep.
And definitely I'll pay you 5,000 sats sounds a lot better than I'll pay you like $5 or $2 or something. Like 5,000 just sounds so much better.
100%.
But I think too, like, and exactly what I'm sure you've been doing with your kids is like, for me personally, like, learning about Bitcoin has taught me more just about like economics and money more than just like anything else. So these last 2 years, I've learned more than the preceding 10, just investing in stocks and mutual funds and all that stuff. So I think like as a kid, that's one thing that I wish I would have had a little bit more of, is I just don't love my dad. Just don't remember learning about money in a real way until I got a little bit older. And so it'll be great to be able to kind of like try to teach your kids about money, about value, about, the value of, I guess, a sat, and kind of how to store your wealth and kind of a low time preference, and like, here's what we're storing away and it'll be worth more later. And yeah, so that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of those things where everyone in the Bitcoin space is trying to build wealth for our family in the next generation and train our kids up in that, like you said. But I mean, the statistics don't bear out that like wealth gets transferred past a few generations. And so
Right.
one of the things I've been thinking a lot about in the last few years, I mean, who knows more about like the Rothschilds and those types of families than Bitcoiners, right? We study
Yeah.
those types of families because the
Yeah.
banking dynasty families and
Right.
stuff. And yeah, they're always the big evil, bad guy or whatever. But they've, since the 1700s or 1600s, they've been passing down wealth from generation to generation. Maybe there's some secrets there, not the moral character, not the moral template that they've created, but how have they created an atmosphere where the next generation isn't lazy, that the next generation's raised with financial sophistication, things like that. So I think it's really important for Bitcoiners to do exactly what you're talking about, and to train our kids how to train their kids, right? It's not just like, here's how you do it. This is, you're going to pass on. And I want more Bitcoiners to think in terms of family dynasty, because those are the people that I want to hold the keys to the future, right? Like these families that have been passed down this good moral character. And it's almost this decentralization of dynasties. My family name probably never going to be that big, but it's not going to be the Rothschilds. It's not going to be the JP Morgans or anything like that. But I want us to have that same type of ability to pass down the wealth that we do have, and do it successfully. I mean, if we can do this right, then each generation should be able to stand on the shoulders of the generation before. And so, yeah, maybe 3 or 4 generations down, we do have some like pretty big hitters in the family and things like that. I would love to be kind of the Genesis generation of that in our family. That would be amazing.
I've thought about that too. I've thought about it, like, just, there's people, Texas is an old state, and you always look at like land like in these really desirable areas, and they're like, oh, this family came in the whatever time period and bought up all, they were smart enough to know that this would be like Austin would develop into this area, and they bought up all this real estate, and now they're worth, they basically have a dynasty. And I'm just like, how cool would it be like 50 years from now, and it's like, oh, great grandpa Joe decided to like buy Bitcoin in 2020 and not spend it and pass it down. But I have the same thought too, as I look around at our generation. It's I'm not like overtly optimistic where we're going, one, just in general with kind of like how much debt we have in the system, but also just I look at our generation's sort of time preference when it comes to money. I have so many friends who, I mean, I think social media is awesome, but with the advent of that, it's just sort of like who's trapped, like the wanderlust generation, like who's going where, who's buying what, kind of like our highlight reel. And I see less and less of like people who are trying to store wealth away to make sure that when they're 70, 80 years old, that they're comfortable and that their family's in a good financial position. It worries me, like, because I see tons of my friends that are just like, I see them on social media, and I'm like, I'm pretty confident, like, you have little to no, like, what are you going to be doing when you're 70 years old? Like, what skill do you have or source of income? Like, and so I think that there's a lot that we can do now to kind of set ourselves up for a better situation. But that's what I'm trying to kind of teach people, not only about Bitcoin, but about just trying to save as much as you can now for later. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what the class warfare will be like later when we have people who have that low time preference and have been putting away money, and people who have not saved their entire life. And with inflation the way it is, or however things, God knows how much things are going to cost 50 years from now, that they're not in a position to support themselves when they're old.
So it'll be more important than ever to have money that can't be redistributed against your will, right?
And Social Security may or may not exist. So we'll see.
All right, that's a good point. So where does like your moral conviction come from? Are you a man of faith? Are you a man of science? That do you have an academic background that it comes from kind of that slant? Like where does your moral conviction come from?
Both. It's a good question. I grew up Catholic. I mean, my name is Joseph Santamaria, so it could be like, there's not a more Catholic name than that, like literally Jesus's parents. I grew up Catholic, went to, Catholic elementary school, Jesuit high school, and actually Jesuit university too. I think like most Catholics, I kind of went on the sort of journey of kind of feeling like I figured out the whole world as a teenager and sort of doubting everything, and then kind of come back to it and question faith, and now I'm sort of in a place where I'm definitely religious and a believer, but I'm also a man of science, and I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. So you know, I'm a physician, so I try to, you know, understand as much as I can about the human condition, but I don't think necessarily you know, two things can be true at once. So yeah, that's my background.
That's cool. You know, as a Christian, I always valued the study of apologetics, like, you know, defending the faith. And one of the things that I see brought up in debates between the Christian apologist and the atheist is the Christian apologist will to kind of debunk macro evolution will bring up the eye and the complexity of it and these non-simple systems that developed and things like that. What are your thoughts on that, since you literally are a specialist, a doctor in that field?
The eye is a beautiful thing that I remember one of my best friends, honestly, and mentors, and it's unique, and I really enjoyed my Jesuit education, because I feel like Jesuits were of course, you know, had a lot of conviction in what they believed in their religion, but also a lot of them were men of science. And one of my mentors was one of the Jesuit priests who was he actually translated Passion of the Christ, that movie. So he spoke like 9 languages, some of which were like dead. Like,
I was gonna say it was Aramaic, right? It was like a dead language.
Yeah. Wow. He was like an archaeologist, just like one of the greatest people I've ever met. And so I remember him talking about how I mean, like I said, they're not, like, science and religion are not mutually exclusive. You can say that the eye's, you know, beautiful and that the earth is beautiful, but you can also say that, like, you know, something greater than ourselves put it into motion. You know what I mean? So yeah, I believe that.
Okay, cool, man. Well, yeah, just I want to be able to get us out of here, so I'm not taking up more than an hour of your time. But dude, we got to do this again. I love talking with you, dude. We're very much on the same page, and I'm sure there's things that we will eventually stumble across something we disagree on, and sometimes those are even more fun conversations. I've been trying to find a group of guys that can, or girls, whoever, but we can come across and do something regularly. One of my favorite shows is BTC sessions on Fridays. He runs you know, why are we bullish? And I think that premise is great. I got to visit the show one time. It was fun, but I would like to do something like
awesome.
That. Yeah. He actually and that was like my I feel so cool moment, because
I'll have to watch that. I have to watch that. I've seen it.
It's from a couple months ago, not too long ago, but I went out to the Beef Initiative. I don't know if you heard of that. It's out in Georgia.
I have.
And so the Beef Initiative, on their Twitter, they posted some pictures of me or something like that. And then on the flight home, you know, when my cell service comes back on when we land, I'm like, I have a DM from Ben at, you know, BTC Sessions. Like, hey, would you like to come on the show? And so it was like, he reached out to me. I mean, at this point, I'm like reaching out to everybody. Hey, can I come on your podcast and talk about my book? I'm just trying to get out there. And then now,
for sure,
like, one of my favorite, you know, YouTube channels is asking me to come on. I was like, yeah, I would love to. So anyways, now he and we both work on the Orange Pill app. He's an advisor on it, and I'm the head of marketing for Orange Pill app. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. Have we talked about that at all? Orange Pill app?
No, I follow them on Twitter. I haven't. It's like a social media to like connect to fellow Bitcoiners in your area. I haven't like dove down into it yet, but I'll have to do that.
Yeah, check it out. I mean, just but you know, mess around on it a little bit, see if you connect with anybody. But yeah, it's new. It's like a couple months old. I saw them. I talked to the founder at Pacific Bitcoin. Back in November, like right when they launched, and just kind of like got the vision of it. And the general idea is that there's like there needs to be a social layer for Bitcoin to operate. A lot of plebs, and it's funny because I do their social media now. So if you see a lot of their tweets, most of the tweets are actually from me. If you see the Orange Pill app tweets, but yeah, so like some of the pushback is from people that are like total hodlers. Like, I will
Yeah.
never spend my sats. I never
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
interact with other plebs or
Sure.
anything like that. And so it's like, that's your right as a Bitcoiner, is to totally do that. That's
Right.
100% fine. But
Right.
if we want Bitcoin to be used in peer-to-peer payments, like online
Yeah.
payments, that's great. But there's already kind of solutions for that. You can,
Yep.
go to places and spend your Bitcoin online.
Yep.
It's kind of more difficult to do that in person at brick and mortar places and things like
Yep.
that. So that's the next big development. We're announcing the Android release really soon. So now we'll have iOS and Android. That'll bring a lot more users in. But then the next big release is going to be in a couple months, where we have what's called the orange pages. So you'll be able to find all the local merchants near you that are accepting Bitcoin. So
That's such a good idea.
it's going
That's
to be really
awesome.
cool. That's actually when the founder, when he was like asking me to come on board, that was where he won me over. I'm like, dude, so that right there, that's the catalyst, I think, for hyper
Yeah.
Bitcoinization.
Yeah.
So I got really excited about that. So yeah, so now I'm a partner in the company and helping with
That's
social
so
media.
sweet.
Tomorrow morning, if you're not doing anything, it's 9 a.m. Pacific time. So I don't know,
Yeah.
you're kind of in the middle of your day, but we're
Yeah.
running a Twitter Spaces where I got Jeff Booth, Robert Breedlove, BTC Sessions,
No way.
who else? Newt Van Home and Daniel Prince. I got all those guys.
Dude,
We're going to sit down and have a conversation about the social layer of Bitcoin tomorrow morning. So
what
yeah,
time is that? 9 your time. So
9
12,
Pacific. Yeah.
11 my time.
Yeah. I think
Okay.
it's 11. Yeah. So
Oh, I'll for sure hop on. That's awesome. I just
dude.
finished his book, Price of Tomorrow.
Oh
That was
yeah,
pretty good. Yeah, have you
dude.
read?
His book's good.
Yeah,
His book's
it's
really
good.
good.
I like
Yeah.
it.
So,
Yeah,
so
there's so
he,
much to go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, he's going to be on. I think we're going to try and keep the space to about an hour just to be
Sure.
respectful of people's time. But yeah,
Yeah.
he's boarding, like getting on a plane right after that to go to Costa Rica. Jeff Booth, not, everybody
Yeah.
else, I think will have a little more time. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just, man, it's really cool when these like big time Bitcoiners, these big time guys are just like making time for, pleb projects and stuff like that. So it's really cool.
Oh yeah, no, I'm still kind of like totally in awe when they even just like respond to my tweets. I've been like following them for so long. I had just like this burner Twitter that I just follow all these, and I'm like, I need to just like dive in and like join the conversation like as myself. So I like made a Twitter like 2 months ago. But to the fact that you got all those guys together is incredible. That's awesome.
Dude,
I
so
look up to all
excited.
those guys.
Yeah, dude, it's so we're excited. I mean, there's some momentum. Like for example, today, Breedlove's coming on the show tomorrow, but he created his Orange Pill app account, so he's actually on the app now. And so there's like more and more prominent people that you can just connect with, and say, like, if you're, because he lives out in Nashville, so if you're in Nashville, you just like hit him up and go get some coffee with Breedlove, and those guys are making themselves available to the community, which is cool.
I want to go to that Bitcoin Park in Nashville at some point with Odell, and then I know there's some sort of space in Austin that I think has that you can go to as well. I haven't checked it out, but there's just like so much fun stuff to do. I mean, I was thinking, it's funny. I was driving my 2-month-old around just in circles around the neighborhood just so mom could sleep, and I was listening to the Blue Collar Bitcoin podcast. Okay. And the CEO of Crowd Health was on there, and I was just like, oh my God, because I was just thinking for the longest time, like, I love Bitcoin, I'm interested in it. Basically, all I do is listen to Bitcoin podcasts and read as much about Bitcoin as I can. But I was like, how can I get involved, like, as a physician? And so to kind of see what Crowd Health has been doing there has been awesome. I'm hearing about doctors that are starting to take Bitcoin as payments and kind of leave the middleman out of it. And so there's so many awesome things sort of on the horizon that are fun to talk about. I mean, even with you, I have like so many different notes, like hyper Bitcoinization, bleeding heart capitalism, all this good stuff that we'll have to chat more.
We've got a lot more to cover, man. Yeah. That's that. I did a Twitter Spaces with I visited Saz Mining's Twitter Space the other day, a couple weeks ago now, and the guy running it, he's like, because their whole team, the whole Saz Mining team, read my book. They do a book of the month thing, and so one month it was my book, and there's all these things that they're agreeing on, and then he's like, all right, I gotta pick a bone with you because I'm a libertarian, and so this bleeding heart capitalism, like, I don't like that term at all. And so we got to debate it a little bit and stuff like that. His point, in fairness, was that capitalism already is the moral system. And so why do we need to redefine that, use that term? Like, because it's kind of almost making it sound like old capitalism is immoral, this type of capitalism. And so my response to him was, dude, we're in a culture where you call your movement, you call it whatever you want people to think about it. So if it's Black Lives
Right.
Matter, or if it's, you know, I love this or I love that, like when we're talking to a generation that's in a very, you know, you were talking about the Zoomers earlier, like we're talking
Yeah.
to a very emotional generation. Like they literally talk about, let's not talk about the details, let's talk about our emotions. So you need to you know, kind of commandeer those terms and
Yes.
take over the high ground. I mean, that to
Yep.
me, it's the moral high ground. And so if you have the moral route, then brag about it a little bit, because that's the kind of culture we're in. I think that personally, we need to be humble. I think that humility is a really good part of an individual, but as a movement, I think there needs to be a little bit of, okay, this is what we're about. So that was kind of my response to him, but it was good. And he still didn't like, he didn't buy my answer. He still thought it was garbage. Which
I
I
agree with you
thought,
though. You got to plant the flag. You have
oh
to do
dude,
it.
so
Yeah.
yeah, so fun. But anyways, dude, Joe, thank you so much, man.
Yep.
I'm gonna get this out sometime
Absolutely.
next week, and I'll let you know
Yeah.
when it drops, and you can show your daughter.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have to do this again sometime. And then I don't know if you're heading to any, my goal is to make it to a Bitcoin conference at some point. So if that ever happens, we'll have to,
Dude, we'll hang for sure. I'm going to be out at Bitcoin Miami. I don't know if you can get all the way out to Miami.
Yeah, we'll see. Is that in May?
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see. But
okay. Yeah. I'm sure there's going to be something out in Texas. Like they've got to have some big conferences out in Texas.
Yeah. I know they had like a couple mining conferences and but we'll see. I couldn't make it work with work, but yeah, I'll have to get out to one of these days. We'll
all right, man. So just for the audience, what's your Twitter handle? Let the people know how they can touch base with you.
Just at Joe Santamaria MD. I mostly just post reviews of podcasts and books and bad memes. So
that's awesome, brother. All right, Joe. God bless, cool. Man. I'm gonna stay on for just a second after I stop recording here, just so you know.
All right. Good talking to you.